Hi, everyone. This is Tracy Mansour, and I'm with marketing team within Randstad. And we are very pleased to introduce you to our next installment of the Talent Navigator series. And today's title session is How UCB Drives Workforce Agility and Elevates the Talent Experience. So welcome to today's session. We're going to introduce you to our illustrious speakers. And I'm firstly going to start with our head of candidate experience from UCB, that's Jonathan Berlan. And Jonathan joined UCB in September of 2019 as global head of talent experience. He has spent 15 years in recruitment in a wide variety of roles with work in talent acquisition and biopharma companies and otherwise, but for the past 5 years in that field with roles based in Paris and Brussels. Since joining UCB, Jonathan has led the biggest recruitment drive in the company's history, all while learning to manage the transition to remote working practices during the pandemic. So talk about a big job during 2020. Jonathan is also responsible for the development of UCB's latest employment brand and all the tools and processes that support recruitment. So we're very happy to have Jonathan with us again, Global Head of Candidate Experience.
And thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yes, we're happy to have you, Jonathan. And then Cindy Keaveney is joining us as well. Cindy is the Chief People Officer of Randstad's Global Brands and is a leading business and human capital executive with more than 30 years of experience transforming organizations and building high-performance teams that produce growth, develop industry-leading products, and drive employee engagement. So I know Cindy has great insights to bring to our panel today. And surely last but not least, Mike Smith is the Global CEO of Randstad Sourceright with a career spanning roles in Australia, Europe, and now in the US. He's been with the firm for 15 years. As an active driver of Randstad's tech and touch strategy, as we call it, Mike is always seeking out ongoing areas for differentiation and to embed change through technology, business transformation, and driving the company ahead. So we're very pleased to have Mike joining us as one of our panelists. So let's get to the heart of the matter today and really to set the stage for what we'll be talking about. This is a great quote that came from actually the Talent Trends Report of 2021, and where Mike is quoted as saying, regardless of whether your company is hiring or retrenching, the C-suite is counting on you for leadership. At no time has workforce strategy been more critical to business outcomes than it is today, and you'll need to elevate HR's function further to meet and exceed expectations. Your biggest challenges may still lie ahead. How will you rewrite your talent strategy playbook for 2021? So I think that's a great segue into what we'll be taking you through today. And so Cindy, I'll drive, you prompt me when you need me to move ahead, but let's get started.
Will do, and thanks so much, Tracy, and welcome everybody. We're delighted that you could all join us today. A little bit of background on the survey itself, the research that we conducted. We had 850 senior executive and human capital leaders respond to this survey. It represents 17 different countries in all of the regions across the globe in which we do business, and various industries, key industries, as you can see listed here. So suffice it to say, a pretty wide swath of international and regional organizations representing most of the industries that we all do business in. On the next slide, you will see a recap of the 10 talent trends that emanated from our research. And I won't go through them all here. What we'll do over the next 45 minutes or so is delve into each one of them and bring them to life by hearing stories and insights from Jonathan and Mike from their experience in their organizations and as they talk to colleagues and other clients. But before we start in, I just want to bring a couple of words to the forefront to try to spark your curiosity and to get your thinking going. We're going to talk about workforce flexibility, or we're going to talk about well-being, It's being front and center to a lot of what we're all doing. We're going to talk about reshaping the supply chain through borderless and repurposed talent. And we're going to talk about diversity and inclusion, a huge topic for most organizations that are doing business. And then driving decisions through data, taking that data and driving insights so that business decisions can be made. So that's kind of at the heart of what we'll be talking about. And without further ado, let's go into the first trend. So this one is talking about focusing on skills, not on jobs, to create value. And that opens up the idea of the spectrum of how talent is recruited and brought into organizations. Permanent, contingent, statement of work, right? Contractors. There's a wide breadth of how talent can be recruited and brought into organizations. And when strategists and recruiters focus on the skills and the work itself, rather than being locked into who and how the work gets done, it opens up flexibility and agility in the workforce. 77% of who responded to our survey said that their talent strategies are much more focused on workforce agility than ever before, right? I think the past year has taught us we all have to be. And 97% say they're really satisfied with the total talent model, that spectrum I just talked about, when they've implemented that within their organizations. So a lot of focus on flexibility, a lot of focus on the actual total talent spectrum and shaking that up a little bit to try to get different talent, to try to get it in more affordable ways, and to try to get it deployed as quickly as possible. So there's a lot that goes into this focusing on the skills. So Jonathan, what is UCB doing and what are you driving within the organization to create that longer term value as you're balancing shorter term gains? So you're looking at, who you're recruiting and how you're recruiting, and how are you changing that as you look within your workforce?
So obviously it's really a matter of striking a careful balance between two individual needs. The long-term strategy of the business means that we're planning with as much foresight as possible, trying to go in a specific direction, which means that we identify skill gaps, we identify things that we want to bring into the business. That's not something that translates easily into the reality of an individual hiring manager who's looking for someone in their team. It's something that's much more aspirational in a sense than the immediate need. So the skill is trying to bring these two visions together. So what we've been trying to work out as best we can has been how to map out these skills gap and turn these into recruitment plans. And then also trying to work with hiring managers to get them to think not just about the role they're trying to fill now, but how that translates into another role in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years time. And so in that sense, our recruiters and the hiring managers have to have a conversation where we're talking about almost design thinking in mind, where actually we need to focus not just on the individual need that we're following here, but also the broader needs of a business. So the actual customers' needs, in a sense. A classic example would be, for example, in IT, where we're looking at bringing people in who have a very clearly defined skill set in digital transformation. But unless we can answer the question of why are we doing this, then we're bringing a skill set that may not match up with our needs beyond the next 12 months. And so it's bringing that entire vision together and turning it into a recruitment plan that makes a difference. So we have strategies around this. We have tried to turn these into recruitment plans. We now have a collaboration in place in UCB that's called the Insights to Impact business unit. And it's a collaboration between our business operations, our finance teams, and the talent department to try and make sure that those long-term business objectives are met with our recruitment needs today. And that's, like I said, a very difficult balance to strike. But we're dedicating an entire team to this, and we're putting in place the tools and the systems they need in order to get this done.
You raise a really interesting point about evaluating right? The role that you need to fill, and is it a longer term role or not? And that most likely would inform the type of talent that you bring in. So that's a really, really good point. Mike, I'm going to turn to you and ask you to talk a little bit about the concept of holistic workforce planning and how that empowers business leaders to make decisions and to work more efficiently and effectively as they think about the talent they bring in.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. I think it's an interesting question because in most of the organizations that we work with currently, in my conversations with their C-suite, if they could pick one area that they were able to excel at in terms of having a better impact on their ability to reach their overall business objectives, it would be getting better at workforce planning. And I've seen multifaceted approaches to workforce planning at the moment. I've seen some organizations almost throughout the book and say, in this current 24 months, given the volatile, uncertain environment that we're operating in, we're going to do two things. We're going to look to bring more agility, and we're going to look to do some scenario planning. And the scenario planning is focused on, if we see X, Y, or Z happen in an environment, how will we respond to that? How have we built internal shock absorbers to be able to respond in a way that allows us to continue to deliver to customers, et cetera? And then at the same time, I've seen organizations say, we don't know how the candidates from a skill set perspective that we need to attract will want to be engaged in the future. We don't know where they might be located. And as a result of that, we need to build the internal vehicles to be able to capture those candidates as much as possible. So as a result of that, I've seen organizations say, let's move towards a total talent strategy. Let's have the capacity to seamlessly get work done via a contingent workforce strategy, a permanent workforce strategy. Let's enable insights into statement of work and what's working well. Let's talk about how we leverage human cloud platforms from gig workers' perspective. And at the same time, let's overlay that with some scenario planning and run bite-sized workshops with our hiring managers who are responsible for probably the greater portions of skill sets that have the largest impact on our ability to be able to achieve our strategy, and really balance that agility and scenario planning to be able to better impact our leaders to reach their goals more efficiently and effectively.
Mike, you just described a term that I use, strategic agility. And it could be paradoxical, right? If you think
absolutely
strategic and agility, but the great challenge and great leaders can figure out how to blend both of those together. And that's exactly what you just described. So thanks for your commentary. Let's move on to the next trend, which is remaining flexible. So we talked about agility. Now we're going to move to flexibility in a fluid economy to win. 64% of our respondents view flexible working arrangements as important to talent attraction. And I would guess that number will only grow over time. People have proven they can do it, and organizations have proven in many instances that productivity is there. So I would sense that will go up over time. And 80% say their business will consider some sort of permanent work from home policy in the future. So I know a lot of organizations are looking at their models, looking at their real estate footprints and figuring out going forward what that configuration will look like. Mike, let's start with you this time. How are you getting feedback from your workforce within Randstad Sourceright to understand how you can support the individual needs during challenging times? So what are you using? What are some of the tools and vehicles, to use your term, that you have in place?
Sure. So we're lucky enough within Randstad Sourceright to leverage the power of the Randstad Group as the outsourcing arm. And more recently, we put in place a tool called Peakon, which is effectively an engagement tool that surveys our workforce. We have the ability to be able to tweak questions within that engagement tool. And it has quite a flexible data layer on it that allows us to plug it into other tools. So we have another tool called Cruncher. Cruncher is an advanced HR analytics platform that allows us to combine workforce data around productivity, turnover, and combine it with engagement, and then run some correlation analytics over them to get predictors on when we see a drop in engagement scores in a particular section of our workforce based on what we've seen happen previously. When that happens, when do we need to step in, and how will that, if we step in at a certain amount of time, likely mitigate the risk of turnover, lower levels of productivity, etc. Without selling too much, we have a global engagement score on Glassdoor at the moment of 4.4 internally, where it sits at 8.4. And I holistically believe that it's a huge part is down, obviously, to our HR teams internally, business partnering well with our account directors, our internal leadership team. But having the tools of Cruncher and Peakon combined just gives us such unparalleled competitive advantage to be able to just apply surgeon-like tweaks to our organization and make people really feel heard.
It's great. So you talk a lot about using the data to predict and to take action. Jonathan, I'll turn to you around the activation component of that. How do you get UCB, your leaders and business groups to align around what actions need to be taken once you get the data and you hear from your workforce about what their needs are? How do you get your organization to align around activating some change?
I think in the context of COVID, an awful lot of the change has been thrust upon us without any form of choice. And so essentially from one day to the next, if we wanted to keep the business going, we had to very quickly address the question of flexibility, well-being, of preserving the employees' satisfaction and happiness in the workplace. That objective was, I think, obvious to everybody, to the extent that I've not been made aware of any pushback from any part of the organization about how that could be done. The big question is really, what's the best ideas? How should we go about this? So very quickly, we instituted a number of things on a sort of whole global business level. First of all, we tried hard to collect that data on people's data work. We tried to make harmonized policies and priorities for everybody. Very quickly, we realized that there was an issue around the possibility of people being at risk of burning out or feeling isolated in the workplace because their home became their workplace. Now, whilst everybody's okay with working at home, I think in principle nobody's okay with living at work. And so that's the paradox of the equation we had to resolve. A couple of things came into place pretty quickly. So regular polling with our employees, really talking about things like disconnection days, email-free days, meeting-free days, and for individual managers, the opportunity as well to reach out to their colleagues, to have hours blocked in a diary where you could have just informal coffee chats with your teams rather than a meeting about something work-related. And it was trying to, I guess, bring as much flexibility in our working arrangements into the workplace without being disruptive to productivity. And it's, again, we talked about balance earlier on. This is another one of those cases of extreme disruption that leads to us finding an immediate balance within the workforce. But it's been quite a journey. It's been quite, in some places, quite a difficult one. But one thing that's come across very strongly in UCB's culture is that actually when you turn to your workforce, they have, as a general, untapped levels of potential and energy and resilience, which in normal circumstances, we would never expect that from people, and yet they gave very generously. And so I think anybody in a leadership position has been humbled by the experience and by the commitment of everybody in UCB. And I feel that's probably common to a lot of the organizations around us.
Yeah, I absolutely endorse what you just said. It is humbling and amazing to see how people have responded. Mike, one more question for you on the concept of flexible working arrangements. As you look out longer term, post-pandemic, people are vaccinated, right? We're back into more of a regular groove. How will you work the flexible working arrangements into Randstad Sourceright?
Sure. So I think based on our own internal surveys that we've done at the moment, most people are indicating that either 60-40 one way or the other is about the right balance of kind of working from the office and home. And we've seen that change over time. Initially, there was a higher score correlated to individuals wanting to work from home more often. And as time has progressed, we've seen that score come down, which I think is interesting as individuals are trying to recreate those kind of water cooler moments virtually. I think we're finding it difficult ourselves in giving advice to clients and trying to live that ourselves on a daily basis, that it's difficult to do that in an authentic and genuine way without it kind of feeling overly imposed, because those conversations are quite opportunistic. I take them as and when they occur. So we're looking at giving our people internally the flexibility to work where they feel that they need to. We are looking at trying to understand from our people what is the right balance to strike from working from the office. And we're quite intentional about going to our people and asking them their opinion on that, saying, well, what days do you think would be good for that? How can we make sure that we align with your colleagues so that we don't have one person in the office one day and 23 people in the next, etc. Interestingly, I see lots of organizations grappling with this at the moment, and the difficulty, I think, becomes greater when the current workforce planning capacity is more difficult to execute on at the moment. So I see a lot of organizations saying, in the current environment, I'm going to increase the amount of contingent workers that I have, and as a result of that, I get more flexibility. But I need those contingent workers to also work from a remote environment and work from home. And when did I bring them back into the office? Do I bring them back with my permanent staff? Do I bring them back? Do I allow them to stay home more often? What's the right balance between that if we have capacity constraints? So I see a lot of organizations still struggling with that. We obviously have a contingent and a permanent workforce, and it's something that we're struggling with at the moment. What we are doing to try and solve it is being very intentional about getting as much feedback and data as possible from our workforce on what they think is the right balance to keep them engaged, to make sure turnover is not creeping up, and that the productivity levels remain the same, if not better, as a result of those actions.
Great. Thanks. Both of you have really helped to frame up the next trend, which is workforce health and wellness. Taking a center stage. And, I like to think about this as, work-life balance. Is that even really possible? It's more like integrating well-being into how we live and into how we work so that we're taking care of ourselves and we're asking our leaders to make sure that they're checking in on our workforce. So it's kind of going from work-life balance and that kind of framework into integrated well-being from the way I look at it. 62% say that wellness programs and organizations are very important to attracting talent. And 69% believe the workforce is as productive or more productive working from home. So that's a pretty strong number from the last year. The respondents are experiencing it can happen. When you think about strategies that you're offering at UCB, you talked about some of them, Jonathan, but anything else around the concept of health and well-being at UCB that you'd like to share with us? Oh,
absolutely. So first of all, let me address the 69%. Of people who think they're more productive working from home. So if we go back in time a couple of years ago, and you'd spend an hour in the car or in the subway getting to work every day, and you'd spend the same hour in the evening getting back as well. Okay, so those 2 hours every day, we now we now spend, not in a car, not in public transport, we now spend them at home in front of our desks, or at our desk in front of our screens, in front of our laptops. So the idea that productivity has increased, I think masks another reality, which is that time at work has increased. Because those 2 hours, we don't get them back. We don't get to spend them with our family. We get up and we sit in our chairs and we do our work. Normally, we would have sat in our cars and not be able to work, but now all of a sudden we're working 2 hours a day. Multiply that by 5 days a week, and all of a sudden you're working an extra day a week. So yes, we've managed to continue to fulfill our goals as workers, whatever these may be. But I think we are working considerably harder now than we did in the past, and I've yet to find anybody who tells me that they're having an easier time of their work life now that they're in the pandemic rather than before. So we need to be really, really careful about this, because people are more subject to the risk of burnout. They're more subject to the risk of isolation. We sent out an email just before Christmas asking for everybody to check in with somebody else in the UCB workforce, quite simply because the last Teams or Zoom call that they have before the Christmas break, for some people, could be the last conversation they have until January. Okay, now things like that can be really, really difficult for us to manage. And because the workplace is sometimes one of the only places where people have meaningful interactions nowadays, then we need to be mindful that this has to be an extremely caring and supporting environment. So UCB has put a lot of weight into measuring every piece of data we can find. This could be our Glassdoor reviews when people describe what it's like working for us. This could be giving managers and leaders responsibility in being very mindful about anything around absenteeism, or the risk of turnover, or just simply exhaustion in their teams, and giving everyone they're working with a huge amount of leeway in terms of being able to adapt to the needs of each team and each individual in these teams. Another way of looking at it is if we look at the people who joined UCB in the second half of 2020, we had about 800 people who joined our organization. These people have never visited our offices, never met their teams, never even met their line manager face to face. Sometimes they left one job on a Friday evening, sitting at home, sent their laptop back. Monday morning, a new laptop turns up. Could be the same laptop as one they had on the previous Friday, but all of a sudden, hey, guess what? They've changed organization. How do you onboard people in these circumstances? How do you make them feel like they're part of something new in the case where their entire work life and work environment hasn't changed at all? It's just the conversations they're having with the people around them that are going to change. Those conversations, they have to be good. They have to be meaningful. They have to be caring. They have to be indicative of a company's values. And so UCB has placed a lot of weight on trying to address this, and also gathering a lot of feedback. This could be through surveys, through all kinds of things. But making sure that the quality of the conversation is there and that we're open to people, having a tough time at work, even if we don't see them, we have no physical proof of this. That's the kind of thing we've been working on very hard in UCB.
Yeah, your hypothesis about the extended workday has actually, from research I've read, McKinsey has a study out saying that the average workday has increased 42 minutes, and that's probably an understatement. So I think you're spot on with that observation. Mike, I know you've done some things in Randstad Sourceright to address the well-being and burnout prevention realities that we're facing. Do you want to share for our audience some of the unique creative things that you've launched since you've been in your role?
Absolutely, and I think Jonathan touched on a couple of them that were very pertinent. I think, firstly, the recognition that individuals are working longer hours, and just acknowledging that with the workforce, I think, goes some way to showing that you as a leadership team understand the increase in time that they're spending at their desks, the stress that they can create, etc. We've done a couple of things. We've instituted days or half days where we have no video meetings or just have no meetings at all, which was a difficult exercise to execute and get people to get their heads around at first, but now I think it's something that they absolutely look forward to. We've also tried to institute people into having no video meetings and instead having walking meetings where they'll have a phone meeting by which they walk for 30 to 45 minutes. And myself, that's become quickly the favorite meeting of my day or week when that occurs. We've also done all of the other cliche things. We've had meditation, yoga, exercise classes. We've gone strategically and had what Jonathan referred to earlier as disconnect days. So we've given our organization an unforecasted annual day off to take that and just completely disconnect from the workforce. And I would have had in excess of 150 individual emails from people saying, I didn't realize how much I needed that day just to disconnect and de-stress. And I want to say thank you because you didn't have to do it. And what we get from that back in terms of above and beyond attitude, behavior, values in delivering to our clients is tenfold and exponential. Then I think we've done a lot of tactical stuff. So we've said at the bottom of your emails, let's say, I don't expect you to respond if this is outside of your usual work hours or your working flexible hours at the moment. We've set up speedy meetings to say, let's make sure that meetings don't go for an hour when you go back to back for 10 hours. Let's make them 50 minutes so you can get up and walk around for 5 minutes and get a tea and a coffee and come back. And all those little things, I think, add up to make somewhat of a difference. I don't think, I still think there's another evolution from a pressure perspective on us as organizations to be able to find a more, I think, systematic and engaged way of working with people from home. And there'll be pressure on organizations over the next 6 to 12 months to get that right.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. Thanks both. On to our next trend. It's about sustaining productivity gains, right? So it's but digital transformation. So we talked about the tactics that both organizations have employed. Now let's shift a bit to digital transformation. A lot of leaders report that investing in HR people, data analytics, so that insights can be provided to the workforce are front and center to many of the organizations that responded in our survey. 47% say they're investing in technology to improve the talent experience from recruiting to onboarding, Jonathan, to your point, how do you do that remotely, to development, to if it comes to career transition, right? How are we looking at that and investing in some technologies and tactics that can help improve that talent experience? And then lastly, the whole concept of innovation, right? 73% expect that innovation will come from talent teams focusing on business critical activities. So how are we collaborating and what technologies are we investing in so that we can communicate and collaborate effectively across organizations? So let's start with you, Jonathan, on this one. How are you measuring productivity against the pre-COVID baseline, or are you?
So I think the most honest and transparent answer I can give you on this is that we should not. Because the short answer is that we'd be tempted to compare the incomparable. And there's, I think, an inherent risk in that. So that said, a lot of the things that drove us to work every morning in the past, they still drive us to work now. A lot of our priorities haven't changed. I guess the realization is that we can deliver work differently, and our measures of productivity in the past may not be as meaningful as we thought they were nowadays. For us, these main priorities, they remain unchanged. They're making sure that patients have access to our drugs, making sure that we're able to contribute to resolving the pandemic in any way we can, ensuring our workforce remains safe and healthy. These have always been considerations of ours. These are still our main priorities. And I guess so long as that's happening, the idea that we're attempting to make productivity gains in a world that has changed so fundamentally means that we don't yet know accurately and honestly what we should be measuring in order for us to get a meaningful measure of productivity. So I'm sorry, I feel like I'm probably dodging the question here, but there's a danger to trying to compare what we're doing today and how we work today with what we did even just 2 years ago.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're dodging the question at all. I think you were talking about how you're viewing it and the decisions that you are making deliberately to try to do the, sustaining of your workforce in different ways. So thank you for that. Mike, how about your thoughts and insights on sustaining productivity as we're trying to balance that well-being and sustainability of the workforce?
Yeah, so from our perspective, we are keeping one eye on where the productivity from a pre-COVID outbreak was within our overall organization, but we're not setting the expectation with our people that this is where we expect you to get back to. And there are, honestly speaking, portions of our population who are significantly below that pre-COVID productivity benchmark that we had. And we are, as an organization, are okay with that at the moment because, as Jonathan said, we could be comparing the incomparable, and there's other benefits that we get from being in a virtual environment, which is less travel and expenses. We don't have as much real estate as we had before. So we're looking at it from a total cost perspective rather than just looking at it in quite a binary fashion. Again, we've been very intentional about going to our people and sharing where we are at the moment on our journey from a productivity point of view. And we've been very transparent about asking them, you're in a working from home environment. Is there anything that we can do to help you become more productive? Are there instruments? Are there technologies? Are there processes that we can instrument that help you continue to desire to want to go above and beyond the usual call of duty? And are there elements that we can effectively augment your operation from an RPA, an artificial intelligence, machine learning perspective that would free you up to have more of an impact on our customers? And we've got some incredibly great ideas, the gold nuggets, we call them, that have come from our people on that. The caveat that we always put on it is that at the end of the day, it also has to connect to either solving a problem or adding value to customers. And if we can clearly draw the line between that, we will happily run experiments with our innovation team on that to see whether we can bring it to life.
Great. The next trend is a little bit more on data, driving workforce decision-making with data. And Mike, I'll ask you to keep talking for a bit here. How are you getting clear insights around skills and skill gaps as you think about the organization that you lead or different clients and colleagues you've spoken to? How are we getting insights?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of methodologies and technologies that can help you close the gap on the understanding of what skills gaps might exist within your organization. We, as an organization, with our clients, have been using what we call a critical role identification framework, and that is understanding what is your overall business strategy and what are the roles within your organization with a particular focus on a skill set that drive a disproportionate amount of value for you achieving that. And as a result of that, who has skills that correlate with that within the organization, and what individuals that may sit in other business lines or segments can make the jump with a minimum amount of learning and development training to enable or support the extra addition of those skills to help you, again, achieve your overall business framework. So I've seen a very pragmatic manual way about going about that within particular lines of business. And then I've seen some fantastic platform technologies that really leverage large amounts of data from multiple industries, global data sets, etc., with the likes of a Fulcrum, a Burning Glass, a Drought, that have the capability to say, this is where you are in your journey, this is where your competitors are, this is why you need to bring X amount of skill sets. Here's the university locally that's untapped in your region that's going to produce more of these skills. And some of them have just been absolute game changers for our clients in being able to tap into those skills and highlighting very concretely what are the gaps within their organization. And the gap becomes much more prevalent from a bias to action when it's correlated with this is where your competitor is at.
Yeah.
And once you do that, you tend to see it creates a little bit more movement around creating budget, getting individuals to understand that this needs to be addressed in the short term, but that you're not going to get a correlation and outcome in your short-term quarterly or business cycle. It's going to be in 12 or 24 months. So both manual and technology platforms really kind of showing the difference there, and very happy to share with the audience afterwards any introductions to those.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mike. Let's move on to the next trend. And this is getting ahead of a still growing skills gap. I had to practice that a few times so it would roll off of my tongue. It can be a tongue twister. There clearly is scarcity, right? If you look at technology and digital, data scientists and data analysts and, in the healthcare industry, there clearly is, in some instances, dire skill gaps across some roles in some industries. And you can read this 40% and this 1 in 5 as we continue talking. How are you, Jonathan, forecasting skills needs in UCB? And are you thinking about disruptive situations in the future as you're anticipating what you'll need? So kind of the scenario planning that Mike was talking about. What are some of the things you're doing in UCB?
So I mentioned in one of the earlier questions the existence of our Insights to Impact team. Essentially, if we're going to try and build insights into what makes a difference for the future of UCB, we nearly need to be much more focused on strategic capability planning. And so for us to try and move forward with this, to be honest, we're still looking for the right answer. An awful lot of the tools that we've looked at that could support us in this, they give us interesting data points, but they never tell the story. It's really difficult for us to find something that gives us valuable and actionable insights. And so, as Mike rightly pointed out, there's a manual side to things, which is almost about getting to know your business really deeply. And then there's the quality of the data you have access to, which is sometimes incredibly hard to get accurately. And then you have to put all these things together to build an engine that allows you to tell the story. We're still on that journey, if I'm honest, and trying to find the right people to help us bridge that gap is probably still the stage at which we are at before we can actually move forward from it. So there's still a way to go, yeah.
Mike, we talk about the dynamic tension of upskilling, reskilling, and bringing in from the outside, right? There's that magic equation. So talk a little bit about your perspective on how to get ahead, right? Who do we upskill? Who do we reskill? And how do we augment from external talent?
Yeah, so I think generally speaking, if I look across our client portfolio and the approach that we have at the moment, I'm seeing organizations really struggle with convincing the hiring manager community to be more open about the time lag and the expense that comes with retraining and reskilling existing staff. And that's because, rightly or wrongly, for the last 10 or 12 years, there has been a predominant focus on buying talent. And that there has been a recognition that you build talent, but you typically do it at the graduate level. And what we're now seeing is that the business environment has become so fast-paced and dynamic that you can't just build. You need to effectively also look at buying and borrowing talent from other departments. But you see that hiring managers have a reticence to say, that's not going to solve my problem here and now. That's going to solve it in 12 or 24 months' time because we need to invest in training, skills, etc. So the biggest gap that I've seen organizations try and tackle is this cultural alignment with hiring managers to say, I understand that a big part of our strategy moving forward needs to be a more even distribution between buying, building, and borrowing talent. Now, the building talent is going to be the next generation of individuals who have high levels of intellectual curiosity, emotional intelligence, data fluency, etc. The buying is still going to occur, but it's going to occur in the roles that add a disproportionate amount of value to our organization. And the borrowing piece is going to be the midterm play that plugs the gap for us. And I see organizations running even like mini boot camps with hiring managers. So they'll take 3 or 4 hiring managers into a session and they'll talk about, here's the state of play within our industry. This is the future forecasted skills gap that we'll see that's coming to life over the next 2-3 years. We are still going to be buying and building talent, but we need to get better at borrowing talent. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to drive internal mobility and we're going to focus on reskilling our existing workforce as part of that. This is the role that we need you to play. Let's talk about your concerns, because the idea of skills relevancy for hiring managers is still very high in the demand portfolio of I need it here, I need it now. And the transition of that mindset to say, I'm going to focus on getting a 12, 24-month return, as well as having a here and now return, as well as having a very long-term return, is where I see organizations needing to go. And it's an incredibly difficult exercise to undertake. I've seen biting it off in small chunks with small groups of hiring managers have a much greater impact than trying to address it holistically within organizations.
Beautiful. Thanks, Mike. Moving on to the next trend, reshaping the supply chain with borderless talent. So Jonathan, I'm going to ask you to talk about this one. When Tracy introduced you, she talked about the incredible remote hiring you did, improving time to fill with unprecedented number of hires within the UCB organization. So share that story a little bit with us to bring this to life.
We, like all organizations, we weren't really ready for 2020 in any way, shape, or form. So I guess we very quickly last year decided we had to recruit very differently from one day to the next. Never in my career had I expected that I would turn around to my entire teams and say, from now on, you don't meet candidates, you don't organize face-to-face interviews, you don't do anything like that. We're going to be doing everything by email and by video conference calls. And so we went from something that we thought we knew and we mastered to a situation where we had to start recruiting very, very differently, including for roles where all of a sudden location no longer mattered. So long as somebody was available and they were the right person, you could theoretically, if they were going to be working remotely, be based pretty much anywhere in the world. Okay, so and then reality hits you. You can't do that because the legislative framework within which we operate doesn't allow you to go and hire anybody anywhere in the world for any job. It simply doesn't happen. And then some more canny members of the organization, suddenly thought, well, hang on a minute. If tomorrow I need a software engineer and I can hire somebody anywhere in the world, great. Let's go and hire somebody in Silicon Valley. I'll get the best people I can find in the world. And somebody in finance would come along and say, oh, wait a minute, if we can hire somebody for as a software engineer tomorrow, let's go to India. There are great software engineers in India and they're considerably cheaper than anybody in the Silicon Valley. And so all of a sudden, everybody interpreted the freedom to hire in extremely different ways, none of which were necessarily connected with the reality of what could be achieved within the still same confines of legality. So, for example, I can't just go and hire somebody anywhere in the world because if I don't have an entity there, how am I going to pay these people? So there are all these things, but suddenly came to clash. Now, I remember when I started, about a month after the start of the lockdown last year, I remember being in touch with our HR leadership team and saying, look, I think it's time for us all to fasten our seatbelts because I really have no idea how recruitment's going to play out for this year. We have a major drug launch. We have a number of other things to do. We have our biggest recruitment targets in our history to meet. And I have absolutely no idea at this point if we can come close to meeting them. I made 3 predictions over time. I said, candidates are probably going to dry up. They're going to value tenure over opportunity. They're going to turn around and say, no, I'm not moving because in this uncertain world, I'd rather stay where I'm safe. I made another prediction, which is that hiring managers would refuse to hire without meeting people. They say, how am I ever going to bring into my team someone whose hand I haven't shaken? And then I actually also said, well, I think remote work would be a hindrance to onboarding, and talent acquisition will probably grind to a halt 90% of the way into each and every single one of our processes because people will fail to commit at the last minute. They'll see it as being too much of a change, too much of a challenge. I was wrong on all 3 counts. All my predictions were wrong, and I can't claim to have built a career on being wrong, but on this occasion, I got it absolutely 100% wrong. And we saw this because our traffic to our LinkedIn job ads actually increased very significantly. After an initial period of about 6 weeks, candidates were much more freely available. They didn't have to travel for interviews. They were happy to interview. It gave them something else to talk about. It gave them something exciting to look forward to once they were stuck at home. Our time to hire actually went down. We no longer had to buy tickets for people to come and travel the world to come and meet us. We could, we found that also recruiters were now much more available to find candidates because they weren't doing quite as much of the stakeholder management than they were. So talent acquisition last year had an absolutely amazing year. We had, like I said, the biggest results we've ever had in terms of volume, the best time to hire, the lowest cost to hire. And so it was, probably and I made just a bunch of really wrong predictions. So it was a big unknown, but I have to say, and this is all credit to Randstad on this one. Your teams and what you guys delivered for us was absolutely fantastic.
Well, thanks so much for that. Really appreciate that. And it's a tough story to beat. So kudos to you and your team. On the next trend, we'll talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion, and the activation and awareness of D&I or ED&I, whatever you're coining in your organizations, over the last 1 to 2 years has been notable, which is probably an understatement. Mike, what is one thing that you are about when it comes to looking at recruiting diverse candidate slates? How are you pushing that through, and share a story or two about how you've changed in the past year?
Sure. So if I look at our client portfolio at the moment, I don't think their actual D&I strategy overall has changed. What has happened is they're executing now with an increased sense of urgency. They have a greater understanding of the benefits that can come from having a diverse and inclusive workforce. And as a result of that, are prioritizing the execution of that strategy over some other strategies that they have, because ultimately they need to make choices. One of the elements that I've seen bring just such an incredible amount of value to organizations is leveraging data sets that show you what the ethnicity, gender, age indication, and general makeup is of a particular skill set within a geography that you're recruiting. And what that allows you to do is get an understanding of, based on the makeup of the skill set there, I can then get an understanding of whether my long list is representative of the skill sets that exist within that market. And if they're not representative of the skill sets that exist within that market, well, then you have a clear item for action. You can say, clearly we're not getting our employee value proposition to this group of diverse individuals in the way that we would like to. How should we go about changing that? Should it be a case of looking at affinity targeting, behavioral targeting? How do we make sure we move towards more SEO targeting in places where we know we're going to catch those individuals' eyeballs? And then by actioning that differentiated engagement and attraction strategy, you can concretely base case against whether your long list changes as a result of that, and then is more effectively representative of the communities in which you work. Secondly, you can then, if you have the end-to-end customer data platform set up, then track how that looks through the funnel. So you can say, okay, how many of them progress to a shortlist? How many then end up getting hiring over a time period of 6 or 7 months? Let's look if that's right. How do we set better D&I targets as a result of understanding what that looks like? We've had lots of clients come to us and say, we want to be bold. We want to be the best. We want to ensure that we have X amount of individuals that represent this community by Y period. And by having access to that data, we're able to go, that's a physical impossibility at the moment. Unless you are willing to hire significant amounts of individuals from overseas and import them. So the ability to be able to very granularly contextualize what the actual makeup of that market looks like has been a game changer for clients. And there's many proprietary data platforms out there that can give clients a leg up to have better conversations with their executives on setting the right targets and moving the needle internally.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Mike. Let's move to the next trend. And I think we've talked a bit about this already, repurposing, skilling, reskilling, and mobilizing the workforce. One thing I'll point out here, I thought the 92% statistic was interesting. Respondents at 92% reported that companies should be responsible for reskilling. And, you know, I think we're seeing that within our own organization and with the organizations in which we're working. So we'll end on our last and final trend on the next slide, which is a little bit about employer brand and strategies that you are employing to elevate that talent experience that we've talked about. So Jonathan, I'll start with you. How are you getting feedback from candidates and your external and internal talent to try to guide your policies and your brand strategy as you build your organization?
So we've just come through a large branding exercise over the last year to come up with actually a bit of a background that's behind me. We spent a long time defining what our EVP is and trying as best we can to make it as authentic as possible. So we spent a long time working with internal stakeholders, doing a lot of focus groups, doing a lot of interviews, asking successful candidates and also unsuccessful candidates on what their experience was of UCB. And then we sort of, I'm going to say, almost ignored what everybody else was doing on the market. Because ultimately, your brand is not something you should be comparing to others. How do you compare your own authenticity with somebody else's? You can't. You're either authentic or you're not. And so either your EVP matches what you're selling or it doesn't. And so one of the more challenging ideas that I put out to a lot of the communications agencies we worked with is that I'm not interested in appealing to everybody. And I don't think UCB is a company for everybody. It's a company for people who have similar values, similar beliefs, similar elements of patient centricity and dedication to their work, which isn't going to fit with everybody. So I said, and a proper brand, it's almost by definition got to be a little bit divisive. It's got to be a little bit challenging. But if it's absolutely unique to UCB, then it's going to come up with something which nobody has seen on the market. I'd like to think we've actually achieved that. And what's happened since then is when we talk to candidates who don't know UCB and who suddenly come across us through our branding, they recognize something about the experience they have in the interviews and what they've seen and what they've been told about by our recruiters and what they've seen on LinkedIn job ads and stuff like that. So I guess that the best proof point we have that we got it just about right is the fact that actually when it comes to attracting people, it attracts not just professionals in their world, it attracts people who share our values and sort of somehow they look at an ad and something resonates in them and they click. That's what we want.
Your changed lives behind you is beautiful. So Step one, check.
Thank you.
You guys
We have
have been
two versions.
great.
We change lives, but actually it's our hearts that change lives and our minds that change lives. It's for caring and for science, and that's why you have half a brain and half a heart.
Love it. Love it. It's beautiful. Tracy, over to you. I know we're right up at the hour, so you're going to close us out. Beautiful.
Yes, thank you so much. What a great panel discussion. And we did have several questions come in that we're going to address as a follow-on since we've run against our time slot here. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us here today. What a great session.